Greetings, lovely people of the internet. I hope you're having a lovely day. I'm Movie Geek and I post film analysis videos every other Monday. So, you're interested in French New Wave but don't really want to hack through a whole textbook chapter on it? I've got you covered. My YouTube name is literally Movie Geek and my channel does what it says on the tin. In this video, I will cover French New Wave's origins in the Cahiers Du Cinema magazine, the developments of author theory, the left bank artists and some of the key films of the movement. Before I start though, I'll just say that while I really hope this video is informative and entertaining, it will only get you so far. Once you've learnt the history, context and theory behind the movement, the best way to study it is just to watch a ton of movies from it. Therefore, although I'll be suggesting relevant movies, what they're like, and links to where you can find them in the description, I'd love to hear your favourite French New Wave movies in the comments. French New Wave cinema emerged from the author theory of filmmaking in the film critic magazine Cahiers Du Cinema, founded in 1951. It's actually still going today and is the oldest French-language film critic magazine still in publication. The manifesto of Cahiers du Cinema, an author theory, was François Truffaut's 1954 essay, A Certain Tendency of the French Cinema, which I'll put a link to in the description. In it, he ruthlessly trashed two screenwriters, Jean Orench and Pierre Bost, and, to be honest, lost the French film industry, arguing that they saw cinema as methodically transferring a script onto film with little to no interest in making the movie cinematic in any way. In his own words, Orench and Bost are essentially literary men, and I reproach them here for being contemptuous of the cinema by underestimating it. He argues that, by focusing on the script and dialogue, the second of which appears in literature and theatre as well as cinema, the film industry was ignoring that there were things cinema could do which other art forms couldn't, for example, montage and editing. If you're interested in Soviet montage theory, click the I in the top right corner of this video and go to 436 on the History of Cinema video. Anyway, this rejection of what Truffaut called tradition of quality led to a new theory of how to make films in its place called author theory. The Cahiers du Cinema argued that someone whose film could only ever be as good as its script was a director, whereas someone who could transcend a bad script was an author. Authors were seen as true artists who understood and respected cinema, and their films would often have a strong personal flavour. Directors were seen as technicians who merely assembled a script into a movie with little artistic input. However, 4 years later, in 1959, having been called the gravedigger of French cinema for his brutal reviews of popular movies, and being banned from the Cannes Film Festival, Truffaut picked up a camera and made his own film using author theory. Truffaut's first movie, The 400 Blows, is a sensitive coming-of-age story and character study. It was also one of the first and definitive French New Wave movies. Truffaut utilised author theory by making the film very personal, both in terms of story and artistic style, and questioning received wisdom about how to make a film. For example, in the famous final scene, Antoine, the young protagonist, looks directly into the camera. Previously, this was just considered bad acting, but Truffaut managed to step outside of his time's attitudes and consider what would actually be the effect of having the actor look at the camera. It turned out, if used carefully, one of great power. The 400 Blows was immensely popular when it came out. It was the cutting edge of cinema. Truffaut even won Best Director at the Cannes Film Festival. The world had just had its first taste of French New Wave and they were hooked. Suddenly, the most popular French directors such as Jean Cocteau and Marcel Carné were the most old-fashioned, and Truffaut was no longer the grumpy edgelord equivalent of a film critic, but a distinguished author. Truffaut opened the door for his fellow writers at Cahiers du Cinema to show the world how author theory was done. Enter Jean-Luc Godard and possibly one of the greatest art films ever made, Breathless. Okay, can we all just take a moment to appreciate the cinematic genius of Breathless? Thank you. Anyway, back to the 1910s, when cinema was a little baby art form, there was no textbook. You couldn't go, oh, how do I make the audience feel tension in this scene? Let me just remember what I learned at film school, because there was no film school. Not until 1919, and it was in the USSR, so if you weren't from there, you could get the point. Everything had to be worked out from first principles. Filmmakers had to experiment if they were going to get anywhere because tried and tested methods just didn't exist. From this experimentation, things like continuity editing and montage were developed, which are still used today. Time travel to the late 50s, and authors of the French New Wave were doing this by choice. Cinema, they argued, due to high budgets and tight studio control, was not taking any risks or doing any experiments. I mean, you wouldn't if millions were at stake, and therefore nothing new is being invented. Consequently, the authors used tiny budgets, no sets, and natural lighting to encourage risk-taking and experimentation and hopefully pioneer new ways of using cinema. Very rarely was this more apparent than when Jean-Luc Godard was editing Breathless. Due to only a vague script and lots of improvised acting, the film was too long. Instead of cutting entire scenes, he cut the pauses out of them, regardless of the fact the camera would then move less than 30 degrees between each cut, which was considered bad editing at the time. When he watched it back, the jump cuts, as they are called now, turned out to work perfectly with the themes and tone of his film. It was this attitude of risk-taking and stepping outside of contemporary attitudes towards cinema that is part of what makes Breathless so great. Along with the flawless acting. Just watch it. I've put a link to where you can get it in the description. Anyway, parallel to this there was the Left Bank group. While they weren't as focused on author theory and cinema for its own sake, in fact they likened cinema to other art forms, including literature, which was a big no in author theory, they were very interested in doing new experimental things with cinema, so are often considered to be part of the French New Wave movement. They were also associated with left-wing politics, and I'm actually begging you not to get political in the comments. If that sounds interesting to you, I'd recommend Alain René's Last Year at Marienbad and Hiroshima, My Love. They both experiment with themes of memory and imagination, as is typical of René. Or there's Chris Marker's The Pier, which is told entirely with stills and a voiceover. Really innovative and very compelling. I'll put links on how to get them in the description. Well, that's your crash course in French New Wave. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you found it interesting. Comment below your favourite French New Wave movies and what movements you'd like to see crash courses on next. I'm thinking maybe Italian neorealism, but it's up to you guys.